You know, here I am in the beautiful city of Houston, Texas, and I was driving on the freeway, and I thought, you know what, I missed out on the rundown last night because, you know, I am a very important person who is moseying around town with the great five-time champion Booker T, and I was like, you know, let me listen to the rundown, let me catch up, let me see what I missed. And what did I miss? I missed John Rocha, the Outlaw, talking crap behind my back. You know, it's funny, John Rocha, because I've always touted you as one of the greatest movie trivia Schmoedown players of all time. First ballot Hall of Famer on the Mount Rushmore. And while I'm gone, you want to call me a hack. You want to say, I only got one date in speed dating, whatever the hell that means. John Rocha, it's not 1992 anymore. People don't speed date. All right, it's called Tinder. But nevertheless, John Rocha, you take some shots at me that were unwarranted. All right, so I just want to let you know one thing. I am about to challenge Frank Janisch in another rundown Schmoedown. See, I kicked his ass last time in the Back to the Future rundown Schmoedown. Through the looms, anybody? But I kicked his ass last time and I won the championship. I won the rundown Schmoedown championship. So I'm going to challenge Frank Janisch to a match. And I'm going to do the one thing that you've never been able to do in the movie trivia Schmoedown singles league. That's defend my championship.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Schmoedown Rundown. Introducing first, KRISTIAN Janisch, and the host of the Schmoedown Rundown, Brad Gilmore.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Schmoedown Rundown, the official after show for the movie trivia Schmoedown. I am your host. Yes, I am back this week. My name is Brad Gilmore, live from Houston, Texas. Joined this time from Los Angeles, California, the mean streets of Los Angeles, California. My man Frank Janisch, and along with a very special guest, Patrick Campbell. What's going on, guys?
Hey, man, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me, Frank. It's good to have you back in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's good to be here again because the weather is about 30, 40 degrees warmer than Chicago. And since I'm staying at PJ's, I was like, hey, I need to use all your stuff so we can do the show. And he gladly obliged. So
if that's what you mean by you accosted me and forced me to do this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Frank, I don't blame you for leaving Chicago because things have not been going well in that city.
For a lot of reasons.
48 hours for a multitude of reasons, especially if you're in any kind of entertainment business. Get the hell out of Chicago right now. But we are joined by a very special guest, and I feel like we should waste no time in bringing her in. She is one half of the Shire Wolves, one half of the team champions, and she looks to make history by winning yet another championship tomorrow, or at the time that we're doing this, it's tomorrow for the Schmoedown Throwdown Live. She's going against Mike Kalinowski for the Inner Geekdom Division Championship. She is Rachel Cushing. Rachel, how are you?
Hi, guys. And I'm fairly convinced that Frank actually lives in LA now, and he's just kidding when he says he's in Chicago.
You know, I think that he is a liar, so I believe you.
I do tell the best lies. I do.
But how's everything going, Rachel? How are you ready? Are you in the mind state for what we're going to see? We're history making. The Schmoedown Throwdown is going to be streaming live for the very first time. How are you feeling, though?
I like to ignore the history-making part because that's just added pressure. I'm feeling okay. Like I'm well aware that Mike, as he keeps saying over and over again, that he's not the same player as he was the first time that we played, and I am absolutely taking that into consideration. But I know that that means that this is not going to be easy. And without going into a ton of details, my life is kind of crazy at the moment, so I wish I could have studied a little bit more, but at the end of the day, I just have to trust what I know, and I know a lot. So I'm going to bring all of that to tomorrow's match and hope it's enough.
So this is different than anything the Schmoedown's ever done before, but you have competed live on stage for the Schmoedown before. Do you feel like it's going to be a similar feeling knowing people are watching you as you're doing this task?
To be honest, I hope not. Yes, I have played live, and I have made no secret of the fact that that was a very difficult thing for me to do. I did not play very well. I think Clark was the reason we won that match. I couldn't remember that Ivan Reitman directed Ghostbusters 2, and I will never forgive myself for that. It's a very tough environment to play in. It's amazing. I've been to all the live events. The energy and the fans are incredible, and it's the way of the future for the Schmoedown. Like it's an incredible future for the show. But it all is very, very difficult for me to do. When Christian explained to me what the Throwdown was, I was a little nervous, but I think I can convince myself that there isn't a live audience because it's just an extra camera.
Right.
And just play like I normally do in the studio and just play, my game one question at a time, and hope that that's enough.
And why go after the Inner Geekdom? I know we saw you in the great tournament last year, but you are a current team champion. Do you think that this is diverting your attention away from, trying to continue to be that team champion? Or do you think that this is something that you have to do? You have to prove it to yourself that you can be the Inner Geekdom champ.
When I was first approached to play in the league, and Christian and I had a very long talk about it, and Ken and I had a very long talk about it, I had seen that inaugural Inner Geekdom match, and I knew that that was my home in the Schmoedown. I didn't start out there, and I know that I've made a splash in other leagues as well, but the Inner Geekdom is where my heart is. And Clark is my ride or die, and we have talked about it, and we would never hold each other back to go after other things in the Schmoedown that we really want. So it is not about diverting any kind of attention. We are very ready for critically acclaimed. We are very excited to play them. She is behind me 100% because from day one, this was the belt that I wanted the most. What Clark and I did together as a Shire Wolf is so important and so amazing, and I'm so proud of it. But on the deepest personal level, the Inner Geekdom belt's the one I always wanted. Even though people don't hold it as high as a standard, people think it's a lesser league, and they talk about it in that way. To me, I think it's harder. I think that the level of questions are far deeper, but they are about movies that I have been watching since I was 5 years old, and that are, hold a special place in my heart.
I think the Inner Geekdom...
Hey, Frank, take it away.
Yeah. I think the Inner Geekdom is a very much tougher league, and I think players like yourself, Kalinowski, past players like Jason Inman and Mark Konopka have really elevated the league, that really elevated the level of play. So I don't think, or at least in my opinion, I don't think it's any lesser of a league compared to teams and singles. I think it's right up there, if not maybe a notch above, because the questions are much deeper. It's much more pinpoint. And as we've seen in some matches, and Mike Kalinowski can attest, it gets downright kind of ridiculous at some point in terms of whose names you got to pull from this corner of whatever universe. So I think it definitely is a much more challenging road, even though perhaps people will look at the league as not quite as deep. But I think the talent there is just as rich, if not even richer than teams and singles.
Yeah, and I understand the argument that Inner Geekdom and Star Wars are more studyable than the main leagues, and that's true. There's a finite number of movies, although we're never exactly sure what the number is. We all have our own lists. But who has the time? That's it's the craziest thing. You could study these and watch them over and over and make your flashcards and spreadsheets, and I've done that in the spare time that I can spare, but sure, it's not a lot. And it's the kind of thing where, you can study for it, but to do so would basically mean sacrificing a whole lot of time on the other end. And it's a balancing act. It's always a balancing act with my life and the Schmoedown, and I have not gotten it right a lot in the past, so I am trying to find the right balance right now. But yeah, I kind of get angry when people disparage the league and say it's easier. So
with in terms of studying, but is it more of a lifelong culmination of fandom that's kind of coming into play? Because as you said, you can't necessarily dedicate X amount of time, maybe you would like to or prefer not to, but really all the years of watching these movies or reading books or TV shows, what have you, is it more of a culmination of all of that kind of being put into one place in the Schmoedown instead of I'm just going to study flashcards and watch these movies on repeat? Is it more of that sense, because I know like there are people who have binders, yourself and Kalinowski and maybe others, but I think what makes it more fun, that league, is perhaps that it's a culmination of your entire life of watching and loving these movies, and you can kind of put that information to good use.
I would also go
Yeah,
as far.
100%. I've grown up with this stuff, and there's certain things I have to study more, but I don't have a single flashcard about a Lord of the Rings. I don't need it.
There you go.
And each of us has those categories, and I've had to brush up on a couple, and I've had to dive deep on a couple, but that's the nature of it, because there's a lot of things you can be a geek about, and there's a lot of things that can be considered geek categories. So yeah, we all have a basis in the love of these movies and having seen a lot of them many, 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 many times, but the league has jumped to a place where I don't know who can come in with just that base level like we all did 3 years ago when it started and expect to be competing with the top tier. I think you do have to have a little bit of a study regime and some revisiting and, whatever works for you. Unless somebody has a photographic memory, and then I suppose they could come in and just sweep us all the way.
Do whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
PJ, you got something?
Yeah, I was also going to say, as far as the culmination goes, for Inner Geekdom especially, I mean, it's also the comic books you grew up reading. It's the TV shows you may have grown up watching. And as the movies come out every year, this league specifically is only going to keep getting harder because we keep adding how many Marvel movies a year, how many DC movies a year. So that's more taxing for the players on top of it because they're having to see every Marvel movie that comes out, every DC movie that comes out. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and it can be really trying.
8 movies. 8 movies came out last year that all could be asked about in Inner Geekdom now. Believe me, I counted and made notes.
Do you think there's been some talk amongst players? I know I've had the conversations myself. Do you think Star Wars should still be included in Inner Geekdom since it is its own league?
It is so hard because I would miss it if it wasn't involved. I think that would leave a very weird hole. But here come the pitchforks. I'm going to say that I think that the Star Wars League should be a once a year, maybe twice a year type of league until they find, even in Inner Geekdom, we have sort of a small list of players.
Yeah.
To be a league, you need players. And the problem, you hesitate to call it a problem, but the issue is that when you have top of the line players like a Mike Kalinowski in Inner Geekdom or an Alex Damon in Star Wars, the people who consider themselves really big fans look at that and go, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so how do you build it out so that it doesn't feel like the same 1 or 2 players are always at the top and everybody else who's good just can't get to that level? And I think that in Star Wars, it should be special and a specialty type of thing where it's, we can still call it a league, but I think it should be few and far between. And I think there needs to be some competition discovered. And believe me, I know Christian's looking for both leagues, desperately looking. But it's hard to go out and find people that can stand toe to toe with Alex Damon, with Mike and myself in the Inner Geekdom. It's asking a lot. They can be found though, because just look what Kevin Smets did.
Yeah, we'll
just
get
this
to
past
that.
week.
I was just about to ask you. about Smets. I saw that match, and much like I had a similar reaction, much like Booker T did when he first saw Ric Flair. When he first saw Ric Flair, he turned to his brother and he goes, "That's the real boy there." And when I saw Kevin Smets, I was like, "That's the real boy there." He was very impressive. I know you watched that match. You had to study it, I'm sure. How impressed were you by Smets?
Unbelievably. A lot of people don't know Kevin and I have known each other for years, and he's been one of my biggest fans since I joined the Schmoedown. And he's been a big Collider fan. He's an editor like I am. We've worked together, and he's a very big geek, particularly a Star Wars geek. And he became a patron because he was a fan of the league, and he auditioned. And the story goes that, he had an okay audition, not a great one, and Christian knew that he wasn't quite ready. You had to, if you were going to go sit up at that table, you have to have a certain level of knowledge, and he wasn't quite there yet. But I knew a moment when Kevin was told that Kevin was going to take that to heart and get to work. And he has spent 6 to 9 months, hitting those movies and making the flashcards and playing in the fan leagues and making a huge splash there. And he studies the game. He's a rookie, a first-time player who understood that he needed to study the game, study the players, study the movies, so that when he came in, he was ready for every aspect of it except the cameras and the lights, which is something you just can't prep for, so you never know. But he was ready in every other way, and it turns out the cameras and lights barely fazed him. So I think that is a hell of a story, not just as his friend, but just for the league and that kind of a character. I think having the mouthpiece works for him. I think that his story is already off to a great start. And clearly, he's sent a message to those of us that have been in the league for a while that, there's a new guy in town and he's coming for us.
It's...
Yeah, I mean, would you be... Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story that Kevin has been through. And I want to say that, for better or for worse, players like Alex Damon, Mike Kalinowski, or yourself, Rachel, have set this bar so high that you're right. Like, some people will look at it and go, I don't know. But Kevin, he seemed to have other ideas, and to be told, now's not the time with his initial audition, and then he comes here and plays the way that he plays. I mean, it's a big middle finger to whoever said you weren't ready, and I just really loved the way he came out, and I don't know if there's been a better debut with the history that he had before this coming into it. I'm really looking forward to what he can do, and especially if he's a big Star Wars fan. You said that, raised my eyebrow. Maybe he might throw his hat into Star Wars League, but that's probably too soon. He probably wants to focus on Inner Geekdom. But this showing was something else, and I don't know if I've been this excited about a new player in quite some time. Probably since you, Rachel.
Yeah. Well, probably, maybe an Inner Geekdom, but since Ethan Irwin, there's
true,
people that just come out of the gates and it's like a mic drop in the first match. And the league needs it, but all the leagues need it. We need fresh blood. We need fresh energy. We need people who are, salivating at the mouth to be present and to go for the belts. And Christian needs all kinds of characters, and he has the attitude that Christian wants, which is, I will do whatever it takes to get there. And that's not a knock on people who don't go about it that way, because it's not an easy road to take. It's a lot of our own personal time, but it is a credit to him that he, took I don't think you're quite ready, and turned it into oh yeah, I'll show you. And he certainly did.
Now, we floated this idea on the show a couple weeks ago, I think, Frank. We were discussing you going after the Inner Geekdom Championship against Mike Kalinowski, and we were going under the premise that when you win tomorrow, live on the Schmoedown Throwdown, you become the champion. It is very, at least in my mind, it's now a possibility that we could see for the first time ever a 3-league champion, where you could actually go after the singles championship as well. Is that something you've even thought of? Does that thought maybe even frighten you to try to do that? Is it too big of a challenge, or is it something you would like to do?
It's been brought up, and pretty much every time it's been brought up, I'm like, shut up. Because
Keep going, Brad.
it's immensely flattering, immensely. And to be honest, I could do it. I know I'm capable of doing it. I know that I've got the knowledge to do it. It's just a question of, not letting the pressure of that get to me, and not letting the sort of overwhelming expectation of that get to me. And for me, I sort of said it a little bit with my match against Adam this year. Again, I don't want to go into a ton of personal detail, but last year I was very sick, which is one of the reasons why I didn't play in the singles tournament. And I'm still dealing with a lot of that. And I'm dealing with things in my personal life. And to be a player in 3 leagues, if you're playing in all 3, you're playing every week. And that was something I had to put a stop to. I couldn't deal with that. And I still can't. I think it's asking too much. There's other players that maybe they could, and I will root for them. I think that there's other triple threats in the league, even now, who will probably, come out and vie for that. But for me, it's certainly, I'm competitive enough and I love the Schmoedown enough to think that that would be amazing, and I would love to be a part of that. But the other side of me, the sort of self-preservation aspect is, one thing at a time. Clark and I are, like I've said, ride or die. We are going to defend those belts again and again as many times as we possibly can. And then when KRISTIAN, told me about, getting a number one contender shot and then a possible shot at the Inner Geekdom belt, which is, again, the one that personally means the most to me, I was like, I think I can handle those two things right now. Yeah. So thinking about playing in singles is it's very far pushed back in my brain. I need to play tomorrow, and if I win, amazing. Then I got to play Critically Acclaimed with Clark next month. And if we win that, amazing. Then I will think about it.
It's fun for the fans to banter about. So.
Yeah, right. And believe me, I get the speculation aspect. And again, to all the fans that have said it and tweeted at me and think that I could do it, that means the world to me. And I would like to think if the circumstances went, favorably, that I would be in a place where I could play singles matches to get myself into that position. So.
Yeah, I think the reason so many people floated out there, as much as I can see it stresses you out to a certain extent, and understandably so. I think the reason so many people floated out there is because a lot of times you think, what if we got to see Ali versus Tyson? What if we got to see Babe Ruth versus Barry Bonds? Well, we know that we can never see those things, but this thing, this is possible. It's within the realm of possibility, and I think that's what makes us want it even more, to see it even more. But obviously, mental, emotional, and physical health is always first on everybody's list. So I don't think you should stretch yourself thin or burn the candle at both ends in order to achieve a dream of the fans by any means. So, but let's talk about this though. What tomorrow for the Schmoedown Throwdown? Is there a category that's going to come up on that wheel that if it starts to go real slow? When you spin it by the wheel and not the pegs, when it's going real slow and it's getting closer, is there a category where you're a little nervous? You're like, nah, don't land there. Keep going, keep moving. You're going to be blowing the wheel trying to get it to spin a little bit extra. Is there a category that you're nervous about?
No.
There it is.
Oh, man, that said with so much confidence. God.
I think we all kind of knew the answer. We just have to ask it. Just because we got to dot our I's and cross our T's on that one.
Of course, no, I get it. And look, there's ones that, like I said, I don't even study for, because if I get them, fantastic. And then there's a lot in the middle that I'm really strong in, and I feel comfortable, and I've done enough rewatching to feel good in. And there was one or two that I knew when I said yes to KRISTIAN, to going on this path, that I said yes to playing Adam and then potentially playing Mike, that I needed to work on. And so in the free time that I have had in the last, couple of months, I have concentrated very hard on those. And I now feel pretty good about them. So, again, this is a league. If you do the work, you can get ready if you feel like there's something you're not particularly strong in. And I've done the work.
So I have
and how do you feel? Oh, go ahead, PJ.
I was going to ask real quick. Obviously, we're talking about the different things that you could end up with on the wheel. Is there anything you'd like to see added to the league? I know that obviously James Bond you did not want in the Inner Geekdom, but is there anything that you wanted or you'd like to see added in?
It comes down to me about a definition for geek. And the thing is, many of us can argue about it in different ways. My issue with James Bond and certain other things that have been thrown out there is that just because you can geek out over something doesn't mean it's a geek topic. I geek out over the Oscars. You want to put that in the Inner Geekdom? I don't think so. So for me, it has to fall under the geek umbrella, which tends to be superhero or fantasy or science fiction based. And I think that the closest of all the suggestions I've seen thrown out there that would fly for me would be video game movies, because I think that there are a good cross section of them, good and bad. Well, maybe not too many good, but it works because it's not too narrow, it's not too broad, and that's what most of the categories are. I've heard various people talk about sort of quasi-extended universes, something like the Alien and Predator movies, Terminator. I wouldn't be against those. It starts getting iffy when people start saying animated and Pixar.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
think that's quite. You can be a geek and love them, but they're not geeky in and of themselves. That's my, separation for
Right,
the
like not in the
categories.
traditional sense.
But that's just me. I mean, there's, like I said, everybody's just defined what geek and geekdom can cover and not cover in very different ways. So,
How do you feel though about? Because I don't know if you heard it on Collider Live. Christian Harloff said about this match. He said, "If you would have asked me a year ago who would win this match, it'd be Rachel, no doubt. But now he's seen the amount of studying that Mike Kalinowski has put into it." How do you feel about those comments from the chairman of the board?
they're legit. Like, I know maybe I'm supposed to be a little bit more bravado about this or in character or whatnot, but you guys know me. I'm just me. I don't respect corruption, but I respect Mike Kalinowski, the person who, very much like me, saw that first Inner Geekdom match and went, that's mine.
Yeah.
That's where I belong. And then he started playing and he realized that his base knowledge, while excellent, wasn't quite enough to, beat me at the time, to go up against Jason. So he was like, he didn't let that scare him away. He said, all right, I'll put in the work. And he spent a year putting in the work. I mean, behind the scenes stuff, he walks up to me in the studio and he'll say some random Lord of the Rings trivia just to prove that he's watching them and rewatching them. And he's like, I want to spin it against you because I want to prove that I'm doing the work. So I'm aware he's doing the work. I'm aware he's not the same player. And, that's why Christian's right. I honestly think this match comes down to who slips up first, who has the brain fart. It's not going to be who doesn't know it. I think we both know this shit now.
Yeah.
We're both there. And it's going to be neck and neck in round one. And maybe the wheel makes a difference. Maybe it doesn't because we're both working on the categories we felt we weren't great in. I doubt he puts spinners and opponents up there. Most champs don't anymore. Plus, what would he give me if I spun opponents? What would I give him that really would turn the game around? So I think this is going to come down to a handful of points, and I think it's going to come down to a goddamn brain fart, which is going to be one of those really annoying moments when you know it and you can't pull it for whatever reason, and that puts you down a point or two. I think the buzzer run will be crucial. This is going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight, which I am both looking forward to and not looking forward to.
Understandably so. Now, that was a great breakdown of how you can see this match going, this championship match, the Schmoedown Throwdown is going to be streaming live tomorrow. But you mentioned another match that you have coming up, one that Chris Clark, 8788, is very excited about. That is the Shire Wolves versus Critically Acclaimed. Now, Critically Acclaimed really does have a solid argument of being maybe the scariest team in recent memory when you just think about the run that they've been on. How worried are you about that match?
I think, with no disrespect meant to who's the boss, that this is our toughest challenge. I don't think that, without giving away too much, Clark and I have talked about it, there isn't a whole lot we can come up with where we think we have an edge on them in certain categories or things like that. They are a very well-rounded team, as are we. So similarly to, what happens in my match tomorrow with Mike, it's going to come down to the wheel, honestly. I think Clark and I might have an edge in the buzzer round just via practice and being used to playing the 5-round match. The boys haven't done that before, so maybe we have a little bit of an experience edge. But in terms of knowledge, I don't know which team cumulatively knows more. So that wheel round is the one that kind of makes me the most nervous in that match.
Yeah, y'all are very evenly matched. That's kind of what I was saying. And the amount that y'all have done and this streak that y'all have gone on, sometimes it's so hard to keep that up that maybe a challenge like this will kind of reignite that flame, be like, you know what, if we get past this, I don't see anybody stopping us. But how is the loss of Emma Fyffe going to affect you and Clark going into this match?
It's going to be very different. I mean, this season is very different across the board for so many reasons. Of the going, Christian taking it over completely and then going live and so many live events and the patrons being, the backbone of everything. It's, I think the show's evolving in ways that are pretty crazy. And within the storylines, it is too. We could not be more thrilled that Emma is a commissioner. Like, I'm sorry, we need strong commissioners, and Emma is a very strong person, and we're excited for her, and she should be moving up. She deserves that. We're going to miss the Five Club so much, though, because when you're up there and you've got Emma and Andreyko standing on the sidelines, like cheering you on and rooting for you, and they walk out with you, and they studied with you all the weeks leading up to it, not having that's going to make a difference. But at the same time, Clark and I kind of look at ourselves as kind of battle hardened at this point. We, went through a lot of battles last year, and we are a lot more prepared than we were a year ago, and we're a lot more experienced than we were a year ago, and we have each other, and that's the most important thing. So Emma can move on and do her thing, and Draco's apparently moving on and doing his thing. But Clark and I are shoulder to shoulder on this, and we'll persevere despite losing the Five Club.
Frank?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Five Club, I think what's special about it is that it will live in 2018 as a very special year for the entire group, and I think that's something really awesome to have. That group accomplished a hell of a lot. I mean, all three of you who competed, Andreyko, yourself, and Clark, all had a shot at a singles belt. I mean, that's for a faction like that, it's never happened before. And then you go on and win the teams and defend the teams. You all played very well in your respective leagues that you were really a mainstay in. So I think it's probably, and I think a lot of people would agree, that it's probably the greatest year a faction has ever had in terms of success and relevancy. Just because, like, if you lose in the Schmoedown, you kind of disappear for a month or two because this league is predicated on winning a lot, and that's how you stay visible. You guys were always there because you were always winning. So I think 2018 is a great year for probably the one of the greatest factions to ever appear in the league.
Yeah, there's something similar to what Sam Levine did in the sense of, you go out on top. Yeah. And some people, don't like that because they want to see you go all the way until you fail, because that's the inevitability with it. And that's, you can't take away what the Patriots did. It was stellar and amazing and crazy and ridiculous. And I doubt anybody's going to, top that. But their two losses at the end before they fell apart against Above the Line doesn't take away from that. But some people think that way. Mm-hmm. So I get it. But I love the idea of, for 1 year, we were the best faction out there, and we all played our hearts out and did amazing. And now we're all moving on and doing our own thing, not because somebody backstabbed somebody and not because, somebody got angry or because we lost or anything like that, but because we're all moving on to not necessarily better, but to different things, and we'll see what happens.
I mean, I'm sure you're all going to still root for each other on the sidelines, just a little more hush-hush about it.
Yeah, we definitely will see where things go in 2019. Season 6 is already off to a rousing start. We're making history with the Schmoedown Throwdown, the Inner Geekdom Championship on the line. Rachel Cushing versus Mike Kalinowski. If you are a patron, I believe at the $10 level, you're going to be able to see that match live as it's going on. And I'm very sure that there are going to be a lot of people on the edge of their seat for this match, because I see it just going down like you said, Rachel. And no pressure on you, none at all. I don't want to add any. But I think that if Rachel Cushing goes out here and does this, Frank, she's going to be very difficult to beat in Inner Geekdom. You got to think about Smets is a challenge, but Konopik's not there anymore. Inman stepped away for a little while. Maybe we could see a resurgence of Hector Navarro. Obviously, Mike Kalinowski's always going to be a threat in the Intergeekdom. It's just going to be interesting to see how the division shapes out after this match. This is a very pinnacle match for the Intergeekdom division, and we're all excited for it, Rachel. I want to, I guess, good luck. I'm going to wish good luck to you. I was going to say congrats, but good luck to you. Break a leg, all the showbiz cliches. And is there anything that you'd like to tell the people before we get you out of here, or anything non-Schmoedown related you'd like to give a plug to?
Sure. I will give a quick plug. I am joining Ken Knapsack for Casterly Talk, a Game of Thrones. It's coming back, guys. Very excited. Podcast that he's got on his feed. So that's where you'll be hearing me a little bit more in the upcoming months. And as always, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Rachel J. Cushing, and I like to talk all the geek movies. And, thank you to all the fans that have been wishing me luck and have been very supportive for me over the last few months when things have been a little bit tough, but the majority of the Schmoedown fan base is pretty awesome, and I'm very grateful for that. So
Yeah, we have to pay attention to the majority and not that vocal minority who gets on all of our nerves.
Yeah, absolutely.
They get on all of our nerves. Y'all know who you are. Y'all know who you are. I blocked you already, though.
Me
all
too.
the vocal minority. But anyway, Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time. As always, we're all going to be rooting for you tomorrow live. A Schmoedown Throwdown. Go to triviasd.com for more information on that. That is Rachel Cushing, one half of the Shire Wolves, the team champs. She be double belted. We will see. Rachel, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Welcome back here to the Schmoedown Rundown. Rachel Cushing on there. We're excited. I'm excited for the Schmoedown Throwdowns. That's the thing that I love, about wrestling. What I loved about wrestling was it was live and you were seeing it as it happened and you didn't know what was going to go on. And the Schmoedown Throwdown is kind of remnant of a Monday Night Raw live, Frank Janisch. But speaking of being remnant of wrestling, Kevin Smets. This man came in. I had no idea who he was. Had no warning of what I was about to watch. And back in the day, there was a wrestler, I'm sure y'all have heard of him, Bill Goldberg. And Bill Goldberg, on Monday Nitro, he wouldn't say a word. He'd come out, sparks and flames would encompass his whole body. He'd breathe in the fire. He'd blow out smoke. And then he'd walk to the ring. He'd hit somebody once. He'd hit him again. He'd spear him. Then he'd jackhammer him. And then it'd be 1, 2, 3. And he walks out 40 seconds later. And you're like, what the hell just happened? And that is what happened with Kevin Smets. I was like, what am I watching? What am I watching? This man was a machine, Frank Janisch. Tell me a little bit. What did you know about Kevin Smets? I can't even say his name. I was about to say Kevin Schmoedown. Kevin Smets and his opponent.
He's quickly becoming Kevin Schmoedown, I think. I think he'd prefer that.
He really
That should be
is.
his new nickname.
Yeah, Kevin Schmoedown Smets. I didn't really know too much aside from the fact that he was friends with Rachel, and we should talk about that a little bit. And I knew a little bit of his backstory in terms of he went in audition, didn't work out. I've seen his comments in the Facebook group, in the Movie Trivia Schmoedown Facebook group. So I kind of knew just about that. I did not see him play at all in the fan leagues, but knew that he was coming up from there. So everyone who's come up from the fan leagues, I think, has proved their worth. So I was sure that we were going to get a good match from him. Didn't know if he was going to win, obviously, but I was certain it was going to be a pretty good showing. Just history tells us that. So, and I think there's when you get someone from the fan leagues now, I think it's easier to verify just their knowledge as long as I'm sure Christian's doing his homework on who he's bringing up. So he has history to go look at in match settings. So I think it's a little bit more of a sure thing in a sense in terms of a quality player coming up. So I was certain we're going to get that. Did not know he was literally going to answer 17 questions correct and only get his last one wrong when he went to multiple choice in the second round. So to come out, get 17 correct, including, 2 steals, shoot. And like everything went perfect for him. It was literally a perfect debut for him in terms of his entrance, his play, and his exit. You talked about it. So it was a phenomenal rookie debut.
It was funny that PJ that I said he reminded me of Bill Goldberg because at the end, remind me of his manager's name, somebody real quick.
Kaiser,
yeah. Like Kaiser Sose.
Yes.
yes.
But he even said, "Who's next?" And that was the thing that Bill Goldberg would say after his matches. He'd look in the camera, he'd say, "Who's next?" So, David Moore, though, let's not throw him under the bus, PJ, because David Moore went out there and actually had a respectable showing, and KRISTIAN actually called out what his major weakness was just didn't know the actors' names. But everything character-related, story-related, he understood.
Yeah, it seemed like it was, unfortunately for David, when it came to the knowledge of the characters and everything, he definitely understood that, but it was the actors. That was kind of his undoing in the end, and it's funny because I've actually worked with David in the past. He and I have worked and done TV after shows before, so he and I have had a history, and I was really excited to see him coming into the Schmoedown, and he had a really great first round for the most part. I mean, it wasn't the best first round, but I mean, considering Smets actually went 10 for 10 plus his bonus question, that was really incredible that David even got 7 of them. Yeah. And then, he didn't do excellent in his round 2. He spent MCU, and MCU, the deeper we go, the harder it's getting. Yeah. It doesn't kind of matter what you're going to get. It's becoming the outlier things like Walton Goggins, obviously, in the third round was a big problem for the question that he lost on. But even questions regarding like who was or who is Paul Rudd's ex-wife's name,
right?
And Judy Greer is becoming a thorn in the side of Schmoedown competitors worldwide. Yeah, just ask Rocha. So it's kind of interesting to watch it all play out. But I mean, David did well, but it's hard to even look at it as other than Smets came out swinging, man. And it was like watching him walk around the studio. Smets was ready, man. He looked like the Winter Soldier. Like there was that killer look in his eye that the Winter Soldier has. He came out to the Winter Soldier theme music. I mean, it was crazy.
It's funny when you talk about David Moore is as good as he was. It's kind of like, here's the thing, Frank. You're a pretty good-looking guy. You're a pretty good-looking guy, Frank Janisch. And I'm sure you do well for yourself. But it's like the Kevin Smets David Moore match is like, if you're David Moore, you're walking in, Frank Janisch, I'm a pretty good looking guy, I'm kind of the center of attention right now, and then Kevin Smets, aka Brad Pitt, walks in the door after you, and it's like, no attention's on Janisch anymore. It's taking away from what was a good performance from David Moore. We're just thinking about, oh my god, this machine Kevin Smets was so crazy. But David Moore, I think, could still be something in the Inner Geekdom division. Just learn some actors' names, like you said, Judy Greer or whatnot, who, by the way, I've had an odd crush on for my entire life, Judy Greer. Is that weird? Californication. Just go look. You get it?
Yeah, I get it.
We get it.
We get it.
A lot of people get it.
Okay, I'm glad that we're all.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're all on the thing. My girlfriend's in the other room. Really hope she didn't hear me just then.
But nevertheless, I thought that Kevin Smets, and I know I said the same thing about Chance Ellison. I said Chance Ellison is going to be a champion in 2019, season 6 of the Movie Trivia Schmoedown. I still believe that. Frank Janisch, whoa, that was a very crazy gesture you just made right there.
Yeah, I lost. I forgot where I was at for a second. That's how disturbed I am by that comment. Anyways,
Kevin Smets, Inner Geekdom champion in 2019. We're only in February. And it's not crazy.
It's actually not crazy. It's actually not crazy. And, I mean, the thing is, though, it's what is his second match going to look like? Because the only way just to go up from here is to have a perfect game, which would be incredible. So he's more than likely going to come down a little bit, but how far does he drop? And I think that's where we'll find out what kind of player he is, especially if he gets a category that particularly isn't in his wheelhouse, because he was very excited about movie release dates. He crushed it, obviously, aside for that final question.
My goodness.
Yeah, he was blowing through there like he was Scott Mance.
I mean,
there was no delay, though. That was the thing that got me. It wasn't, what year was Spider-Man 2 released? 2004 or whatever. It was 2004.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything he said was with confidence. It was crazy watching it play out in the studio itself and just seeing the confidence in his eyes. I mean, if you pay attention, even in round 1, every question, his pen was to the whiteboard, like right as the question was ended, and you just see him going, and he knew. It was incredible.
Like I said, it was probably one of the more perfect
answer
debuts.
To that final question? Does anyone remember?
It's 3.
Does anyone know? It was like what 2 Marvel movies or what 3 Marvel movies were released in 2003?
3 Marvel movies came out in 2003, and I believe it's Hulk, X2, and Daredevil. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, that's right. That is right.
Yeah, the question wanted to know how many.
Other than that,
yeah.
Yeah, the question wasn't what year; it was how many were released in a single year. Which, by the way, is still somewhat of a difficult question. But yeah, and for him to only miss that one, I'm not too upset at him with, because everything else was so surefire. And like I said, I think this guy's going to be. He like I said, that's the real boy there. That's the real boy there.
I'm excited. He the way like I said earlier, like everything really just clicked for him. Coming out, playing the match, walking out, even his post match, and his pre match stuff. I mean, it was as near perfect a debut as you could get, and it was damn near impressive. And it definitely showed a guy who was hungry to prove Christian wrong, specifically in a sense, because Christian told him he wasn't ready initially, and now here he is, and he's throwing it right back in his face, and he did it in a pretty startling fashion and a very entertaining fashion. And it was actually really fun to see Christian's face as round 2 was happening. And you see Kevin just blowing, and he's like, yeah, that's right. He's like, yep. But I bet you Christian was more than pleased to take the quote unquote L.
Oh,
on that
hell
one.
yeah.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, he was awesome. I can't wait to see the next Kevin Smets match. But also, I know there's somebody who's producing the show who's very excited for our next guest and was excited for our guest match that he had against Mr. Del Rio here in the singles league. So we're going to get to that. Frank Janisch and Patrick Campbell are going to take it away with their interview with the one and only Witney Seibold.
Right now we are joined by Witney Seibold, who made his singles debut. He's no stranger to the Schmoedown. He is part of Critically Acclaimed with William the Beast Bibiani, but we're going to kind of discuss his singles debut here a little bit. Witney, thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Now, how long was this in the making in terms of making a singles debut? A lot of the fans, a.k.a. Chris Clark, have been wanting to see you make your singles debut. You've played very well for the most part in team play, and you've popped up in free-for-alls. How long do you think you were waiting to make a singles league debut? Were you itching to get in there?
The idea was floated actually pretty early on. That I could come in and start doing singles tournaments and kind of compete on my own. Maybe as early as like our second match together. And, I was sort of thinking about it. I had proposed the idea a little bit, but the opportunity had never really presented itself. And this was finally the time for it.
Now, when you got the opportunity, how did you go about preparing this as opposed to playing a team match with Bibiani? Because obviously you have him there to lean on in the second round, in the final rounds of a match. But this is just going to be you. How are you anticipating what it was going to be like as a single player now?
Well, it's a little more intense because first of all, you just don't have the support of a teammate. Mm-hmm. You have to rely on your own brain. That's a difficult thing, and it's just you by your lonesome underneath those lights. So, to prepare, I watched many episodes, many of the singles episodes, just to sort of get a good vibe, get it into my blood, get the sort of the idea of the questions I was going to be asked, and also I had to sort of come up with a good walk-in, a good entrance, kind of like a persona I could take with me into the ring.
Well, I think you definitely did that. I mean, that Eraserhead entrance is going to easily be one of the best entrances, I think, of the year. It was just a lot of fun. So, congratulations on that. It was great.
Well, that's sweet of you to say, although I'm not sure most people are going to understand what that is. From what I hear, most of the people who most of the players who make entrances based on films made before the year, maybe 2000 or so, are a little tend to baffle the audience. They don't really. There's a lot that's just not really understood, unfortunately, especially when it comes to weird cult crap like Eraserhead. So I'm glad they let me do it because I'm pretty sure I baffled a lot of people.
Well, if you could,
where was it shot?
The outdoor scenes were shot behind Ralph's near my house. So that is the back of a grocery store. And the elevator is actually Bib's elevator in his apartment building.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and here's a little bit of trivia too. In Eraserhead, in the opening scene, he steps in the elevator, and the door stays open for a really long time. It's like 13 full seconds in the film. And I wanted to recreate that, so I needed somebody to hold the door open button while I was in the elevator. So in that shot, Bibbs is actually crouched inside the elevator out of shot, holding the door open button for me.
Oh wow, we need a behind the scenes picture of that one. That would have been fun. Now, when we get into your match here, you had a pretty good first round, 7 points. You've always done really well in the first round when you've been in a team match, so it's kind of more of the same. But tell me about your opponent, David Del Rio, in terms of had you heard anything about him? What did you know? Or are you just kind of just going in and knowing that you just got to play your game?
Well, more than anything, no matter who you're going up against, you just have to play your game.
Mm-hmm.
And David was, what do they call him? Diamond Dave. I didn't even know his nickname until just a few days before the match. I didn't really look into him. It was his debut. I wasn't really sure what I was going up against.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going up against somebody who's making their debut, they could be anybody. They could be just some neophyte, or they could be an expert in disguise. And it turns out he knew his stuff. His win was well-deserved.
And then when we get into round 2, let's talk about the decision to stick with Robin Williams. What was some factors that were running through your mind that helped you make that decision?
Well, Robin Williams he's really ubiquitous. I had seen most of his movies, and it was also a slice that was sponsored by a Patreon subscriber. And so it landed up on the Robin Williams slice, and in that split moment where, you can choose to spin again or you can choose to go with that category, I thought of the Patreon subscriber in that moment, thinking it'd be really disappointing for a player to land on it and have them just sort of pass it up. I know if I was a Patreon subscriber and I had put, my favorite category on the wheel, I wouldn't be miffed, but I might be just a mite disappointed if a player passed it up. So for whoever it was that sponsored that slice, I have since forgotten their name, unfortunately, but I wanted to do them a favor, and I was a little bit cocky in the moment, so I just said, sure, let's go with Robin Williams. And then they start asking me questions about, August Rush and RV and, garbage movies I haven't seen. So, it kind of hobbled me a little bit in that round.
Well, I think we can at least say that the fans are going to be happy to hear you have a good heart behind what you were doing, even if it ended up crippling you a little bit. But, I mean, it is Robin Williams. It can be literally anything when it comes to his filmography. It just, unfortunately, it was kind of that post-2000 stuff you were talking about a little bit earlier, where maybe not the best Robin Williams movies.
Yeah. Like, and I've even seen some I've seen Death to Smoochie, for goodness sake. Why couldn't they have asked me about Death to Smoochie?
Underrated.
It's underrated as maybe sort of like a cult oddity. That is a strange movie.
Yeah.
And now, Whitney, as you wrap up your turn and Del Rio, he lands on Spinner's Choice. He goes and he lands on Spinner's Choice, picks actresses. He does pretty well. I mean, I thought the difficulty was fairly up there for that category. He manages it pretty well. And now you're down by a point, and with the Schmoedown, anything can happen here. Going into that final round, you pick your numbers, and things start to not go your way. How do you handle something like that? I mean, you've played in matches before, obviously, but not, like you said, you're up there, you don't have the support of a teammate. How do you kind of keep your mind on the game and try and just take it one question at a time?
Even if you're falling behind, even if you're way behind, the question or you don't. So if, KRISTIAN or Mark whips out something completely obscure and you happen to know, you can say with complete confidence that you know the answer. And the trick is just to keep that confidence up. No matter how badly you're doing, you still know the answer to those questions. You can still answer them, and you can still answer with confidence. So if they ask you about Four Christmases and you know for sure that it was the Barbarian Brothers, you say for sure, that's the Barbarian Brothers.
Well, and I felt like you definitely showed that confidence when you got to horror as your 5-point question, and for it to ask what Paranormal Activity movie was the only one set in the 80s, it didn't seem like you really waited on it. So that was good for you that it's exactly that confidence you're talking about.
Just to, in any sporting event, the trick is just not to get rattled. Don't let the opponent get to you. Don't let the lights get to you. It's just you and the question after a second.
And then Del Rio, he ends up you forced it back to him because you hit the 5-pointer, so you avoid the TKO, and you forced him to do some work there, and we know that he got his 2 and 3-pointer and came out victorious, 17-16. So it was a close match. You had a pretty solid singles debut. Unfortunately, some of the questions just didn't go your way in terms of Robin Williams and the third rounders. But overall, how do you feel you did, and where do you think you'd like to go in terms of singles league?
Well, I mean, I don't intend to sort of like back off or lick my wounds at all. I'm eager to get right back in there. If the opportunity presents itself again, I would love to get back in the ring and see what I can do, and be my obnoxious, cocky self and answer more questions, besting somebody who might even be my superior next time. Sometimes it just comes down to the luck of the draw, and it's entirely possible that something could have gone a little bit differently. They could have asked me slightly different questions, and I could have come out on top. So, there's no need to regroup. There's just a need to stay on the horse and get back in.
Gotcha.
Well, that makes sense. And I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't actually talk to you about it. You have a pretty big team match coming up next month as well. Obviously, you guys are taking on the Shire Wolves. So right now, where's your head at with that match?
Well, I mean, the Shire Wolves are really intimidating. I'm going to be incredibly nervous up until the match begins. And then, once the match begins, you're in game mode and you just have to concentrate. But the Shire Wolves, I know they have historically done incredibly well, and they have every advantage and every stat in their favor. But that's no guarantee. That's no guarantee that we'll do poorly or that they will do particularly well. All we can do is cross our fingers and hope our good day is better than their off day.
Now, with facing the Shire Wolves, is there a particular part of that match, because it's a 5-rounder and you've never played in a 5-rounder, is there a particular area in that match that you're most keyed into or most curious about how you'll play? Because there is the betting round, that's the 3rd round, and then the 4th round is the speed round. Let's talk about the speed round. How do you anticipate you playing in that kind of match? Because you don't necessarily have to wait for the question to be finished. You can go ahead and buzz in if you think you know it. Have you thought about a tactic in terms of how you want to approach a speed round? Because the Shire Wolves are kind of well known to be pretty good there in that area.
Yeah. Here's a little bit of trivia about me. I've actually been on a nationally broadcasted game show in the past, and so I have some experience with actual hand buzzers that they used on a network TV show. And those buzzers are really tricky. They're a pain in the ass. Mm-hmm. And I also have really slow reaction time. So this is going to suck.
No.
And what's going to happen is William has already agreed to train me on the button.
Okay.
Try to bring up my reaction time a little bit.
Yeah, I think he kind of figured out something.
My reaction time is only slowing down as I get older.
Yeah, I think Bibbs has messed around with the buzzers a little bit. And I think he figured out a way, so he's going to pass that knowledge on to you, Chris. How do you think your guy Witney did this past match, and how do you think he's going to do in the future and against Shire Wolves?
Look, Witney, you're human. I get it. And look, the actual the actual match, though. I mean, I wish you could have spun away from Robin Williams, but hindsight is 2020. But the focus now is on that team championship match. It is going to be very stressful up until the first question, Witney. But you know what? You're going to rock that sucker to the end of time.
A great way to sort of intimidate them. Maybe if we come up with an even more impressive entrance, then
do it.
It'll definitely put us in better standing.
Do you guys have you guys come up with an idea of what you want to do, or do you already know what you guys are going to do?
Golly, we have we currently have like a dozen ideas. we're kicking around what we can do. We always want to do sort of like a cut scene or a film scene, and our ideas have gotten far too ambitious for their own good, and it won't be long before we're just sort of inserting entire feature films.
I think it's kind of been like your signature move with both of you, is that you do these kind of like little features, if you will. You're right, and they're little
movies.
Little movies. I think that's kind of become your calling card in a sense. And I for one enjoy them because no one else is doing them, and you guys really do a good job, especially with the Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I thought the Monsters Inc. one was really
the Monsters
cool
Inc.
too.
Yes, that was a great one too.
The one we forgot to talk about.
Yeah.
The Monsters Inc. Entrance, that was all William's idea. He was the Monsters Inc. fan.
Gotcha.
And, he of course, had access to a lot of those people that we saw make cameos. So we were able to sort of tool around town for a little bit, getting that footage. It was pretty great.
In terms of entrances, is there a particular one that stands out to you as maybe your favorite one that you've done or that you really enjoyed putting together?
The Mystery Science Theater one was pretty special because we got to write those jokes and we got to time it out and we got to sit in the chairs. It was like being on Mystery Science Theater, so that was pretty terrific.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I just, real quick, going back just to the singles league, is there anyone in particular you would like to take on now as your next opponent once you guys are past the Shower Wolves?
Oh, golly. Here's the thing. I'm all confidence and cocky on camera, but when somebody says, who can you play against?
Yeah.
My first thing is to say, oh, God, they'll all beat me. I don't know. Oh, no. So I feel equally undermatched against just about anybody at this point.
Well, I mean, you're definitely a formidable opponent, and people definitely do recognize that. So I think whoever you do play against next will be, they won't take you lightly. I'm sure you won't take them lightly as well. I look forward to seeing your next match, and obviously, definitely your team match, critically acclaimed versus Shirels. That's going to be happening soon, and it should be one for the books.
Now, there's all kinds of great stuff coming up.
Yeah.
Bibbs has his match coming up. I know there's a big free-for-all coming up. That one looks like it's going to be the last time I did a free-for-all, it was really fun. Mm-hmm. And, the free-for-alls are just terrific. So that's something we can all look forward to.
It's funny.
Yep, there's a little cameo right now from a cat.
Well, we're really looking forward to seeing what you have next, Whitney. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us tonight.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for calling. Chris, you're coming out again, right?
Yeah, I'm coming out for your team match.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll see you.
All right, that was Witney Seibold. It was a pleasure having him on, getting his thoughts. And before we go back with Brad, me and PJ here, we're going to talk about a question that we posed to the community in the Facebook group, the Movie Trivia Schmoedown Facebook group, about what two players most identify or represent the given seasons of the 6 seasons we've had with the Schmoedown. So that's 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, and seasons 1 through 5.
I'm really happy to have this conversation with you. I wish I had a little bit more prep time, Frank. But
he had plenty. He had plenty.
And by that, he means he gave me like half an hour notice.
He has way more notes than I do. Mine's all up in the noggin. He actually types stuff down. So
sometimes that's good. It's
no.
studying.
What I'm saying is you're a little bit more prepared than I am, but I have an idea of where I want to go because I think Chris and even Brad in a group chat we kind of discussed this a little bit, and so when it was coming up about like season 1, my mind automatically goes to Riley, the first champ of the tournament in 2014, and who he played against was Makuga. Makuga had some pretty memorable moments. Obviously, he was involved with the Blue Fairy moment, which is very iconic when he played against Christian Harloff. So I don't know how you sit with 2014.
Well, it's funny because I actually have the same two people for my 2014 season because in a lot of ways, when you look back at the 2014 season and the birth of the Schmoedown, Riley being the first champ and Makuga coming out, they're the first ones who really start to kind of not just embrace the game, but give the game a little bit of personality. They're throwing a lot of themselves, and you start to see the beginning of some of these characters that we're going to get to know much later in the game, or much later in the show. But right now, it's still finding its feet. It obviously hasn't taken off, but the Blue Fairy incident is an all-time great Schmoedown moment, and Riley winning the belt that first time is a really great triumph, so you can't not really give that to them.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a no-brainer, especially when there's only 7 matches, whatever it was.
Right.
It's pretty easy to dwindle it down. And when we get into 2015, the second season, it was strictly team tournament, and again, right before I moved over to Collider. My initial thoughts was because of they were the eventual champs, even though they didn't win it in that year. It's still technically included. It's the Schmoes, and they were the champs. Obviously, Christian and Mark Ellis. I would say them because they won it, and they had I don't know if a lot of people remember, but they had a very interesting first match against Nerdist, Dan Casey, and Jessica Chobot,
Totally.
where there was a kind of like a snafu in the questioning, and it was a multiple choice scenario where I forget who was commentating, gave away the answer, but anyways,
Yeah, a whole situation with
it was
that.
a whole situation because look, had it gone differently, Schmoes could have actually lost that match, but they didn't, and they ended up becoming champs. They faced off against Box Office Breakdown, formerly of JTE and Bob Finstock. So I would go Schmoes just because they won it, and I kind of like that the champions identify that season. How did you see it, Pat?
It's interesting because you brought up the people I have, and mine is actually the team of Box Office Breakdown. And I look at things a little bit differently. You're totally right about what you're talking about with the Schmoes. There, and obviously, on top of that, Christian and Mark gave this league.
Birth.
Yeah, gave birth to this whole league. And not just that, I mean, this team tournament starts here, and obviously they're like the champions. So maybe they should, but it's Box Office Breakdown for me because, again, when you look at the history of the Schmoedown, this is what's kind of important is this is the birth of the heel in this league. This is the birth of what would eventually become the Patriots and that whole faction because you have JTE and Finstock together. There's a lot that rides on these two being together at this time in this season that really makes the rest of the Schmoedown important and happen. And so I have to give it to them because this is the birth of that. And those heels are a very specific personality that we need.
Yeah, I'm going to have a little pushback with that just because I think, while I think a smidge of that is true, it wasn't necessarily the plan, I think, at that point. Because when we get into this the Collider era, if you will, the 2016 season, who I think the faces of that season would be Dan Murrell. I think that's kind of a no-brainer for anyone making this kind of list. But the other person is John Roca. John Roca created the Outlaw persona there. That's where it became fully realized, and it kind of plays into that heel archetype, and it plays into the characters more now, where it's fleshing them out. John Roca was the first player to really fully embody that and bring it to the forefront of the Schmoedown. Not to mention his great play. He had a legendary match the blindfold match against Christian Harloff, which Freddie Prinze Jr. was co-commentator on that. And while he did lose to Mark Ellis in the tournament final, he ended up beating Mark Riley for a second time at Spectacular, the number one contenders match. He beat him previously in the tournament. And I think John Roca was so instrumental in shepherding this kind of the show, that the type of show that Schmoedown would ultimately become and is this day, that I think Dan Murrell, I didn't even talk about Dan Murrell, but those two guys really set a standard in terms of character and in terms of level of play that we saw from Dan Murrell. Dan Murrell, coming over from Screen Junkies, was a movie fights champion, and he wins the belt off of Riley, and he goes on this incredible run undefeated. Yeah. And player of the year, and so I don't think you can deny that he is certainly a face of that league. That's where my two guys sit.
Well, no, and it's interesting because you're absolutely right about what you're talking about, and obviously, Box Office Breakdown, it was not the plan for them to become the heel then, but it sets it in motion. Sure. Obviously, it is Roca and Murrell for season 3 because they became the face of this by the time the season was over. I mean, we talk about the Bespin incident still all the time when it comes to Roca, and what a great match that was against Scott Mance. You have Dan Murrell with that unprecedented run coming over from Screen Junkies, beating Riley and just running through over and over and over again. Every competitor that was put in front of him, he demolished. It was quite fun to watch.
The match he had against Mark Ellis at Spectacular, highly underrated.
Oh, absolutely.
It is a phenomenal match when you really look at it. Ellis was the only one to really go toe-to-toe with Dan Murrell that year.
Yeah, and I think that we actually don't give Ellis always a ton of credit either. That guy can go quite far when he gives the best game that he has inside of him, and he did take Murrell almost to the end with that.
Yeah. As we get into the fourth season, 2017, this one's
easy.
Oh, is it?
I'm sure it is for Chris.
I'm sure it is.
But obviously, it is easy in the sense that it's got to be Sam Levine. Why? Because he won both tournaments that year. He won the singles title off of Christian Harloff at 2017 Spectacular. There's no doubt in my mind that it is him as one of them. Now, the other player I don't know how people are going to respond to this one, but I think it's JTE. And let me say this first. Had Levine not had the run that he had, I'd probably give it squarely, or solely rather, that's the word, solely to the Patriots.
Sure.
The historic, unprecedented run that they went on defending the belts. But Levine, he did something pretty incredible and he did it across 2 leagues, in the team tournament, singles tournament, winning the singles title. Right? JTE, he's on the Patriots, but he also, and undefeated with teams and Patriots. But he also made it to the tournament singles final against Sam Levine, and I think with the Patriots and with above the line Sam Levine, those 2 groups were central or the biggest draws that year. So while I can't entirely give it to the Patriots because I got to give a slot to Sam Levine, I'm going to give the other slot to JTE because he did make that tournament final, was part of the historic run that the Patriots were on, and that's where I'm going to sit with for the 2017 season.
So I definitely have Sam because you're completely right. Sam did something that was unprecedented over 2 leagues. It was just incredible to watch his rise, essentially. But the other rise we need to talk about that season, at least for me, is Rachel Cushing.
Sure.
I mean, Rachel came into this league kind of the baby face of the league. People weren't sure what to expect. And not only does she come in the singles tournament and do very well, she starts doing the team tournaments with Ken. They are doing very well together. Ken turns his back on her.
Yeah.
She has the historic three-way fight where she takes on Blofeld's cat, which is a match for the ages. In my opinion,
could have won.
She could have won exactly.
This is crazy.
And then look at her Inner Geekdom run too.
Yeah.
And Rachel was such an unprecedented force at the time, and to be across 3 leagues like we were talking about. And I mean, obviously, we were just talking to her earlier in the episode, and the toll that can take on someone is very hard. But she still persevered. She came through, and for me, there's no way I can't give Rachel that for that season.
Yeah.
Can I just say something really quickly?
Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, look, out of context, you guys don't understand, but we had a huge discussion about this, and I said that the best person that would represent season 4 was the 4 Horsemen, and I put Bibiani and Robert Meyer Burnett. I know that sounds like total bias, 110% bias, and yes, it is for Bibbs, but for Rob, let me make an argument, and I hope Crystal's listening to this and hears this too.
Rob, we love you, but
Rob had the biggest arc in season 4. He lost the belt. He went to he left the 4 Horsemen. He went into the Lion's Den, and then after all of that, got locked in a room at Spectacular. You know what? Saying this out loud, I realized that I was stupid.
No. Don't feel stupid.
I mean, a little bit, but no.
Look, here's the thing. We all like what we like what Frank was saying. And I can completely see where someone like you who loves Rob and loves Bibiani could be coming from. And that was a great story arc, don't get me wrong. But when you have these powerhouses this season with Rachel and you have Sam, I can't not swing that way.
You gotta. I think it's unanimously, aside from you, that you gotta pick Levine. You gotta pick Levine. So my question is now, you gotta pick between Robert Meyer Burnett and Bibiani. Who do you pick, Chris?
It's Rob. It would be Rob.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. All right. We're done with this one.
Because look, I mean, it's just his story. He was centered, and Blofeld's cat too. Okay. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I can already see the messages from Christian after this.
Yeah, and messages all over the place. 2018 season, the one we just had, a really another big leap for the Schmoedown there, and. So you picked Rachel for last season along with Sam. Now the reason I wouldn't go with Rachel is because I think she had an even more significant presence and even better play in 2018 with the Shire Wolves. She had a number 1 contenders match right off the bat in singles league. She had a perfect, accurate match, not a perfect game. A perfect, accurate match. Let's get those two differentiated. Perfect, accurate match. She answered every single question correct. Did she have a multiple choice in there? Yes. So it's a perfect, accurate match, not a perfect match. Anyways, I digress. Then she went into Inner Geekdom, had a deep run in Inner Geekdom tournament. Yes, she lost in the semifinal, but team champ, undefeated. Played probably one of the greatest team matches to ever have been played in the league. It was an absolute barn burner at the 2018 Spectacular. So with all that in mind, yes, Rachel is definitely in there, but her partner, Clark Wolf, had a hell of a year in singles as well. I mean, she had a North Contender shot. How she got it is irrelevant. She played it, and she got to Sam Levine. Took him to overtime. Lost because of the freaking crudes. Okay? That's ridiculous. And then you take a look her run in the tournament that year, and what was it? Southside by me? Southside with you.
Southside with you.
Southside with you.
Or,
I mean,
yeah.
look, literally that close to facing John Roca for the title. Now you could say, well, that guy on the other end of that match, the other side of the table is Ethan Irwin. I can hear your argument, but I think for what the Shirewolves as a whole did together and separately in their leagues, and the meaning behind being the first female champions, and not to take anything away from Mara Konopka, as she was the first female champion in Inner Geekdom, it's a huge accomplishment. But I think because Rachel and Clark played in multiple leagues and did what they did in terms of going undefeated that year, I would say 2018, the face of that year is the Shirewolves.
And I can completely see where you're coming from, but I have to give it one to the man on the other side of the table, who is Ethan Irwin.
Sure.
I mean, Ethan came in and just had an insane run over the year. He got the belt his rookie season, which was quite the feat in and of itself. He lost to Mark Andreyko, which is very interesting. The only loss he had was to Mark Andreyko. And Andreyko, when Andreyko's on his game, man, he's on his game, and he took down Irwin. And it was quite the spectacle, but Irwin earned every step of the way that belt. And he came so close to potentially not having that and losing, and yet he still made it through. And so, good job to Jay Washington for getting him through that as the manager. But I also have to give it to Mike Kalinowski, because Mike Kalinowski last season really rose so far from where he had that devastating loss originally, the triple threat between JT and him and Rachel. And to watch this rise over the last year and a half to 2 years in these last seasons, to what he became with Corruption, to what he did in the Team League with Chance, to what he finally did to almost win the belt just to lose it, only to go up against Mara again to win the belt. It was incredible to watch. And, I mean, he earned that belt every step of the way.
Sure.
And so, for me, what Mike did, storyline-wise, what Mike did actually as a competitor, it's hard for me to argue that he didn't completely embrace everything that the Schmoedown is for that season. He completely earns it to me.
I think if I was going to do the complete antithesis of the Shirewolves, I would give it then to Andrew Guy and Mike Kalinowski.
Sure.
For those kinds of same reasons. I just think the Shirewolves is a better look and representation of what the Schmoedown is. I mean, don't get me wrong, Kalinowski and Andrew Guy, absolutely phenomenal what they were able to bring to the league, and obviously Mike ending the year as an Inner Geekdom champ goes a long way. Andrew Guy had a couple shocking wins, but I think Shirewolves in terms of representation and I think that goes a long way as well, and the fact that they're champions, I think just even further heightens that point.
And I don't think you're wrong. They are currently 2-time champions.
Yeah.
And obviously with a third...
1-time defending.
Yeah.
Or not defending. They haven't defended yet.
Or... Yeah.
No, there's just one. Oh, no, they did.
Yeah,
defend.
exactly. They did. They defended. So
It was a long 2018.
it's been a long 20. So we have, 2 wins with the belt.
Yes.
With a third defense or a second defense on the title.
One defense.
Yeah. Wow. You got me all screwed.
I'm all. Yeah, I know.
So
they won it once and defended it once.
Look,
It's
what
two
we're
different
saying
things.
is the Shirewolves are great.
Yes.
And they completely earned that spot, and I completely see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I actually no. This is actually serious. I feel like another person who represents season 5 is Brianne Chandler, because without her work with the Patreon, we wouldn't have had season 5.
Yeah,
That's
but
a good
I think
point.
we're talking about in terms of play though, and that's more behind the scenes, which is definitely invaluable. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to.
Oh no,
but I think
that.
in terms of
That's just another
visibility
thought,
and
because
play,
everything you guys were saying was perfect.
Yeah, and the other point I want to make before we wrap up this topic is that there's many people we could argue for. So, and the fact that we can do that, I think is a great sign for the Schmoedown overall.
Yeah, and I just want to make it clear, we're not saying any competitor is a lesser competitor because they weren't picked. Really, there's there's an argument to be made for any one of the people in this league. Like, anyone could be the person that defines the Schmoedown in any way, and I think that's what makes the league still so special to me.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap that up, and then let's we're gonna go rejoin Brad to wrap this bad boy up.
Hey, before we cut to that though, Frank, I think that there was some people. We have some responses to this question.
Actually, we can just cut it and not backtrack on that transition.
We could, or I could make a joke out of it.
Well, that's not a good look.
For you.
Yeah, for me. Yeah, we were trying to. This is what this show is.
This show is what this show needs to be.
If you make a mistake, you're gonna burn for it.
Look, all I'm saying is there was fans who wanted to be heard. You tried to cut to Brad first, and now we need to hear from the fans.
I know.
Chris, I believe you have some responses, so let's talk about that.
I knew that.
Oh, these are really good. Okay, so we have David Morris who says, "This is hard. My heart is being torn as I write this. I could change so many of these names at any given point, but this is what my heart says." So season 1, Makuga and Riley. Season 2, Finstock and Nost. Season 3, Clark Wolf and Merle. 4, JTE and Roka. 5, Brienne, Chandler, and Andrew Guy. And season 6 so far, Janine and Whitney.
Okay.
I guess he's a psychic.
Yeah, that must be it. Or delusional. Either one.
I don't know. It made Chris happy, so let's give it to him.
Yeah. What else we got?
Maybe it's a bot account that I made. Leo Logan says season 1, Riley and Makuga. Season 2, Schmoes and B.O.B. Oh, box office breakdown. Season 3, Merle and Roka. 4, Levine and Harloff. That's good.
Okay.
5, Irwin and because Harloff went on his revenge tour.
Absolutely.
Then we have Kristen Smith. I have 2 more. Kristen Smith has Ellis and Harloff for 1. 2 is JTE and Finstock. I mean, come on. That's what she said.
Kristen's right. Come on.
3. Yep. 3 is Roka Wolf. 4 is Cushing Merle. And 5, because Kristen's my best friend, Bibiani and Kalinowski. I almost said McQueenie. And then the best one is Aaliyah Moore. She said, Winter, Roka and Dan, Spring, Rachel and Clark, Summer, Stacy and Brienne, and Fall, Kalinowski and Ken. Oh, seasons. Get it, guys?
I got it.
Oh, yeah, we got it. Aaliyah,
Seasons.
you are wonderful. Thank you for that. I think there's a lot of great responses in there, though.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there was some crossover with us, and there's definitely some different distinct voices, which I like.
Yeah, I would love to hear, if you're listening or watching this, I'd love to know what you guys think, who best represents the season so far. You can only pick 2, and that's what makes this tough.
Go down to the comments below us, right down here. Just comment or tweet at any of us. I mean, that's cool, too. We like to hear from you guys.
I think we can. Can we throw it back to Brad now?
We could,
okay,
and we will.
Let's go to Brad.
Well, that was Witney Seibold, one half of critically acclaimed and impressive singles debut. Will he and William the Beast Bibiani go on to defeat the Shire Wolves for the team championships? We're going to have to see. I think it's the strongest match up yet. But, Frank, why don't we go around the table, let everybody know where they can find you, follow you, and everything you got going on.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at FrankieJ29. And if you want some Schmoedown stats, actually, I released a power index rating on TriviaSD.com. Kind of takes into account all their stats, and it stacks everybody up in terms of how they, fall in line. And then if you want to just a simplified version, I guess you could follow SD Rundown Stats on Twitter. I'll post some random stats from matches and from players at various times. So go ahead, check that out.
Hey, our special guest host for the week, the man who's letting Frank Janisch lay on his couch for the evening, Mr. Patrick Campbell. Patrick, let people know where they can find you and what you got going on.
Of course. Once, real quick, thank you guys again for having me. It's always great, so thank you for that. You guys can find me on Twitter at PJ_Campbell, or Facebook at Patrick Campbell _PJ. You can find some of my writing over at TriviaSD.com. I do some of the interviews. I've written a couple of, good articles over there, I like to think, at least. And, of course, you guys can find my podcast, The PJ Campbell Show, on iTunes, Spotify, and over on Podbean. And we actually had Brad Gilmore on this week.
That's
Frank
right.
is one of my hosts over there, and we had a really good time having Brad on, and it kind of just became an episode of The Rundown, but we had a good time. So thank you guys again for being on.
Slightly so. I've heard good things, though. I've heard good feedback from that episode. I appreciate you for having me on. We'll have to do it again sometime. How about our producer extraordinaire? Let the people know where they can find you, and are you or are you not a secret agent?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChrisClug8788. Those numbers mean nothing. And Brad, I cannot confirm nor deny that I have a flight out to Washington, D.C. tonight just because you're asking too many questions. You are going to die tonight. So keep rocking.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. No, I don't
Brad, you got to get out of here. You got to go.
You can't tell me I'm going to die and then follow it up with keep rocking and God bless. You can't say
Keep
that.
rocking in an
Is that
afterlife.
okay?
Yeah.
And you can find me on all social media at Brad Gilmore. Hopefully I'll live to see this episode air. And check out the Brad Gilmore Show as well as Booker T and I every single week. Until next week, though, this is the Schmoedown Rundown. We will see you in the future.
I think those last four numbers are Chris's social security number. The last four. I think so.